Philip stood in the doorway of their bedroom on a Tuesday evening, watching Zoya apply her lipstick with the meticulous precision of a surgeon preparing for a critical operation. The late afternoon sun filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across their king-sized bed, the one they'd bought together when things were still good between them. She caught his reflection in the vanity mirror and rolled her eyes before he even had a chance to speak, as if she could already sense the disappointment that was about to spill from his mouth. "I've been thinking about something," he started carefully, choosing each word like he was navigating a minefield. "There's a night program at the law school downtown. It's designed for working professionals. I could finally finish my degree, the one I started before we got married." Zoya's hand froze in midair, the lipstick hovering just inches from her perfectly shaped mouth. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the distant hum of traffic from the street below their apartment. Then she laughed, and it was a sharp, cruel sound that felt like broken glass scraping against his skin. "Night school?" she repeated, turning slowly on her cushioned stool to face him directly. "Philip, you're 34 years old. Night school is for losers who couldn't cut it the first time around. You want to sit in some depressing, fluorescent-lit classroom with a bunch of failures and dropouts? Is that really how you want to spend your evenings? Maybe it's not too late to—" "It's embarrassing." She cut him off with a wave of her hand, her wedding ring catching the light. "Do you know what people will think? What my colleagues will say? My husband going back to school like some desperate middle-aged man having a midlife crisis? It's pathetic. Just stop with these ridiculous ideas. You have a decent job at the accounting firm. You make okay money. Be grateful for what you have and stop reaching for things that aren't meant for you." Philip stood there, looking at his wife, really looking at her for what felt like the first time in months. When had she become this person? The woman he'd married 6 years ago at that small ceremony in her parents' backyard had been different. She'd smiled more, laughed at his jokes, encouraged his ambitions, or at least he'd thought she had. Maybe he'd been fooling himself all along. Now she stood before him in her expensive designer suit, the one she'd bought with her last bonus, her face a carefully constructed mask of contempt and superiority. "Maybe you're right," he said quietly, letting the words hang in the air between them. She smiled then, a satisfied expression that didn't quite reach her eyes, and returned to her makeup application. "I know I am. I'm always right about these things. Now, I have that conference in Chicago this weekend. The hotel is covering everything, and there are some important clients I need to schmooze. Don't wait up when I get back Sunday night. It'll probably be late." After she left that evening in a cloud of expensive perfume, Philip sat on their bed for a long time, staring at the wall where they'd hung their wedding photos. He remembered that day, how happy they'd both seemed, how full of promise the future had looked. Where had it all gone wrong? Had it been gradual, or had there been a specific moment when everything changed? Then he stood up, walked to the living room, opened his laptop, and filled out the application for law school. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, typing in his information, his work history, his reasons for applying. When he reached the essay portion, he wrote about justice, about second chances, about becoming the person he was meant to be. He submitted it before he could change his mind, before Zoya's voice in his head could convince him he was being foolish. The acceptance letter arrived 3 weeks later. Philip read it twice, then a third time, unable to quite believe what he was seeing. He'd been accepted into the evening law program, starting in the fall semester. Classes would run from 6:30 to 9:30, 4 nights a week. It was going to be brutal, but he didn't care. This was his chance. He didn't tell Zoya immediately. He waited until the weekend, until she was in a good mood after landing a major account at work. Even then, her response was predictable. "You actually applied?" she asked, her voice dripping with disbelief. "After I told you how stupid it was?" "I did," Philip said, standing his ground. "And I'm going." She stared at him for a long moment, then shrugged. Fine. Waste your time. But don't expect me to rearrange my life around your little hobby. The first semester nearly destroyed him. Philip would leave his accounting job at exactly 5 o'clock, fighting rush hour traffic to grab coffee and a sandwich from the deli on 3rd Street, then arrive at class by 6:25. The classroom was exactly as Zoya had described it. Fluorescent lights, tired faces, people juggling work and family and education all at once. But they weren't losers. They were fighters, people who refused to let their circumstances define them. Professor Morrison taught contracts that first semester. She was a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that could cut through excuses like a knife through butter. She didn't coddle anyone, didn't accept late work, and expected excellence. Philip thrived under her harsh standards. He'd study until midnight every night, sitting at the kitchen table with his textbooks spread around him like a fortress. Zoya would come home late, if she came home at all, barely glancing at him before disappearing into the bedroom. She was traveling more frequently now, Chicago, Boston, New York, San Francisco, always for work, always with important clients, always staying in nice hotels that her company paid for. Philip only slept about 5 hours a night, existing on coffee and determination. His co-workers at the accounting firm noticed the dark circles under his eyes, but he brushed off their concerns. He was fine. Better than fine. For the first time in years, he felt like he had a purpose beyond processing tax returns and reconciling balance sheets. But Philip discovered something unexpected during those long nights of studying. He was good at this. The law made sense to him in a way numbers never quite had. Contracts, torts, criminal procedure, constitutional law. He absorbed it all like a man dying of thirst, finally finding water. The logic of legal reasoning, the intricate dance of precedent and argument, the way a well-crafted brief could change someone's entire life, it all fascinated him. His professors noticed. By his 2nd year, he was consistently at the top of his class. Professor Morrison pulled him aside after Contracts to 2 and told him he had real talent, that he should consider specializing in litigation. Professor Chen, who taught criminal law, said the same thing. Philip felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time: pride in himself. "You're never home anymore," Zoya complained one night during his 3rd year. It was nearly 11 o'clock, and she'd been drinking wine, her cheeks flushed pink in the dim light of their living room. She'd come home unexpectedly early from what was supposed to be a week-long trip to Seattle. "I'm studying for the bar exam," Philip replied, not looking up from his practice questions. "It's 8 weeks away. You're always studying, always buried in those damn books. What about me? What about us?" He did look up then, really looked at her. She was still beautiful. There was no denying that. But there was something hard in her eyes now, something calculating. "What about us, Zoya? When's the last time you asked about my day? When's the last time you showed any interest in what I'm doing?" "I'm building a career," she shot back. "Someone has to be the adult in this relationship." "And I'm building a future," Philip said quietly. "For us." She snorted, an ugly sound. "Right, for us. Keep telling yourself that." She went to bed angry that night, but Philip didn't care. He had 8 weeks to prepare for the most important test of his life, and he wasn't going to let her derail him now. He passed the bar exam on his first attempt with scores in the top 15%. The results came on a Friday afternoon, and Philip sat in his cubicle at the accounting firm, staring at the screen, unable to quite process what he was seeing. He was a lawyer now. After 3.5 years of night classes, of sacrificing sleep and social life, and any semblance of normalcy, he'd done it. A small litigation firm downtown, Henderson and Associates, offered him an associate position 2 weeks later. The senior partner, James Henderson, was a sharp-eyed man in his late 50s who'd built his reputation on complex civil litigation. The interview had gone well, but Philip had tried not to get his hopes up. "You're older than most of our associates," Henderson had said during that interview. But your professors speak very highly of you. Morrison called me personally, said you were one of the best students she'd seen in 20 years. That means something. The offer letter arrived via email at 7 in the morning on a Monday. The salary was 30% more than he'd been making as an accountant. Philip read it 3 times, then accepted immediately. He gave his 2 weeks' notice at the accounting firm that same day. When he told Zoya that evening, she was getting ready for another trip, this time to Austin. "That's great," she said absently, focused on packing her suitcase. "More money is always good." "Aren't you going to congratulate me?" Philip asked. "I just completely changed careers. This is huge." She looked up at him, and for a brief moment, he saw something flicker across her face. Was it resentment? Fear? He couldn't quite identify it before it disappeared behind her usual mask. "Congratulations," she said flatly. "Now, I really need to finish packing. My flight leaves at 6. That was the moment Philip started paying attention to things he'd been ignoring for too long. The way she angled her phone away from him when texts came in, the frequency of her trips, the fact that she always seemed to have an excuse for why he couldn't join her at work events anymore, the expensive lingerie he found in her drawer that she never wore around him. Philip's first month at Henderson and Associates was intense. He worked on 3 different cases simultaneously, learning the rhythms of actual legal practice as opposed to theoretical classroom exercises. He was assigned to work under Sarah Kim, a senior associate who specialized in employment discrimination cases. She was brilliant, methodical, and she didn't suffer fools. "You're doing well," she told him after his first major deposition. "Better than most first years. You have good instincts." Those instincts were now telling him something was very wrong at home. Zoya was traveling almost every week now, sometimes twice a week. She'd come home exhausted, barely speaking to him, then disappear into the shower for long periods. She'd started going to the gym more often, buying new clothes, getting her hair done at an expensive salon in the city. Philip told himself he was being paranoid. She was successful, ambitious, career-focused. That's who she'd always been. But the voice in the back of his mind wouldn't shut up. It was a Thursday evening in November when everything changed. Zoya was supposed to be in Denver for a pharmaceutical conference. Philip had come home early from work with a headache, planning to take some aspirin and lie down. He walked into their apartment and immediately noticed her laptop sitting open on the kitchen counter. She usually took it everywhere, guarded it like a secret. He shouldn't have looked. He knew that even as his hand reached for the trackpad, waking the screen, but he did it anyway. Her email was still logged in. The most recent message was from someone named Raz Blackwell. Philip didn't recognize the name. He clicked on it. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Room 2847. I booked the suite this time. Don't be late. R." Philip's hands started shaking. He scrolled down, finding more messages, dozens of them, going back months. "Miss you already. Last night was incredible. When can we do this again? You're all I think about." His chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped steel bands around his ribs and was slowly tightening them. He kept reading, each message worse than the last. References to hotels, to dinners, to a weekend in Napa Valley that Zoya had told him was a solo work retreat. He clicked through to her sent messages. There were responses from Zoya, just as incriminating. "You make me feel alive again." Philip suspects nothing. He's too busy with his law books to notice anything. Philip sat down heavily in the kitchen chair, still holding the laptop. His mind raced, trying to process what he'd just discovered. How long had this been going on? Who was Raz Blackwell? He opened a new browser tab and searched the name. Raz Blackwell was a partner at Sterling and Cross, one of the largest corporate law firms in the city. 37 years old, Harvard Law School, specialized in mergers and acquisitions. His LinkedIn profile showed a handsome man with perfect teeth and an expensive suit, posing in what looked like a corner office with a view of the harbor. Philip felt sick. He closed the laptop carefully as if it might explode and sat in the growing darkness of their apartment. He should have been devastated. Part of him was. But underneath the pain and betrayal, something else was stirring. Something cold and calculating. He'd spent 3.5 years learning the law, learning how to think strategically, how to anticipate moves, how to build a case. And now he had a case. His wife was having an affair with a corporate lawyer, and she thought he was too stupid to notice. Philip didn't confront her when she came home Sunday night. He acted normal, asked about her trip, listened to her lies about the conference sessions and boring dinners with clients. He watched her perform, and he played his part too. Over the next 3 weeks, he conducted his own investigation. He checked phone records, found receipts she'd hidden, tracked her credit card statements. He created a detailed timeline of her affair. It had been going on for 8 months. 8 months of lies, of betrayal, of her sneaking around while he'd been working toward a better future for both of them. He also learned everything he could about Raz Blackwell. The man was married with 2 kids, living in an expensive house in the suburbs. He drove a Tesla, belonged to an exclusive country club, and had recently made partner at his firm. His wife, Jennifer Blackwell, was a pediatrician. She posted frequently on social media about her children, her perfect family life. Philip felt no sympathy for Raz. The man knew what he was doing, knew he was destroying 2 marriages for his own pleasure. But Philip also recognized an opportunity. Raz had more to lose than Zoya did. Much more. Philip didn't rush. He continued gathering evidence, building his case like he'd been taught. He made copies of everything, stored them in multiple locations. He consulted quietly with a divorce attorney named Patricia Rodriguez at a different firm, asking hypothetical questions about asset division and evidence admissibility. Hypothetically, Patricia had said, leaning back in her office chair, if you had documented proof of adultery, it could affect the settlement significantly in a fault state, but more importantly, it gives you leverage. Information is power in these situations. Philip understood leverage. He understood power, and he was starting to understand revenge. But before he could act, Zoya's world began to implode on its own. It started with a phone call on a Saturday morning in December. Zoya's face went pale as she listened, then red with anger. "What do you mean? Everyone knows?" she hissed into the phone. "How is that possible?" Philip pretended to read the newspaper, but he was listening to every word. "My college reunion. That's next week. I'm not... Jessica, I don't care what Laura said. It's none of their... You know what? Tell them all to go to hell." She hung up and threw her phone onto the couch. Philip looked up innocently. "Everything okay?" "Fine," she snapped. "Just drama with some old college friends. Nothing important." But it clearly was important. Over the next week, Zoya received multiple calls and messages that left her increasingly agitated. Philip pieced together what was happening from her side of the conversations. Somehow, word of her affair had leaked to her college friends. Someone had seen her and Raz together at a restaurant, recognized them both, and the gossip had spread like wildfire through their social circle. Zoya was furious, humiliated, and desperate to control the narrative. She decided to attend her college reunion anyway, convinced she could face down the rumors and emerge victorious. Philip almost admired her confidence. Almost. She came home Sunday night with a black eye and scratches on her face. Her expensive dress was torn at the shoulder. Philip stared at her in genuine shock. "What happened to you?" "Those bitches attacked me," Zoya said, her voice shaking with rage and tears. "Laura and Jessica and the whole group. They called me a homewrecker, said I was destroying families. Laura shoved me first, and then it turned into this whole thing. Someone filmed it. It's probably all over social media by now." Philip helped her clean up, got ice for her eye, listened as she ranted about betrayal and jealousy and people who couldn't mind their own business. She never once admitted the affair was real, never once told him the truth. The video did end up online. Philip watched it on his phone the next day during lunch. It showed Zoya at what looked like a hotel conference room, surrounded by well-dressed women in their early 30s. The audio was muffled, but he could make out accusations being hurled. Then someone shoved Zoya, and she shoved back, and it escalated into a full brawl involving 5 or 6 women. It was ugly and embarrassing and very, very public. By Tuesday, Zoya had been contacted by lawyers representing 2 of the women involved. They were claiming assault and emotional distress. They wanted money, apologies, and public statements. "This is insane," Zoya said Wednesday evening, pacing their living room like a caged animal. "They're threatening to sue me. Me, when they were the ones who started it." "What are you going to do?" Philip asked. She stopped pacing and looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in what felt like months. "I need a lawyer, a good one, someone who can make this go away quickly and quietly." Philip's mind raced. This was it. This was the opportunity he'd been waiting for, delivered to him like a gift from the universe. "I could represent you," he said carefully. Zoya laughed, a bitter sound. "You? Philip, no offense, but you've been a lawyer for like 5 minutes. I need someone experienced, someone who handles high-profile cases." "I work at a litigation firm now," Philip said. "This is exactly the kind of case we handle. And think about it. Who else are you going to trust with something this personal? Some stranger who will judge you? Or your husband?" He watched her process this, saw the calculation in her eyes. She was weighing her options, trying to figure out which choice would cost her less in money and dignity. "Would your firm even take this?" she asked. "I'd have to ask," Philip said. "But probably. We handle all kinds of civil litigation." The truth was, he had no intention of involving his firm. What he was planning to do would get him disbarred if anyone found out. But Zoya didn't know that. Zoya didn't know anything. Philip spent the next 2 days setting everything up carefully. He met with Henderson and told him he had a conflict of interest on a potential case and would need to handle it independently. Henderson, assuming it was a family matter, didn't press for details. He then contacted the lawyers representing Zoya's former classmates. There were 2 cases being filed, one by Laura Mitchell for assault and battery, and another by Jessica Chen for defamation and emotional distress. Philip introduced himself as Zoya's attorney and requested all relevant documentation. The lawyers were happy to comply. They sent him witness statements, medical records, the video footage, and depositions they'd already taken. Philip reviewed everything meticulously, building a complete picture of what had happened that night. The facts were damning. Zoya had shown up at the reunion already defensive and aggressive. When Laura had asked her directly about the affair with Raz Blackwell, Zoya had not only confirmed it, but had bragged about it, calling her former friends jealous harpies who couldn't keep their own men satisfied. Laura had then called her a homewrecker, and Zoya had thrown a drink in her face. The fight had escalated from there, but the video clearly showed Zoya throwing the first physical blow. There was no way to defend this successfully. Zoya was going to lose, and she was going to lose badly. Philip could make it even worse. He scheduled a meeting with both opposing counsel, telling them he wanted to discuss settlement options. They met in a conference room at a neutral location, a bland office space rented by the hour for exactly these kinds of negotiations. "My client is willing to settle both cases," Philip began, "but we believe the demands are excessive given the circumstances." Laura's attorney, a woman named Susan Park, raised an eyebrow. "The circumstances being that your client assaulted 2 women at a social gathering and has been carrying on an affair with a married man, destroying his family." "Alleged affair," Philip said smoothly, "and the video clearly shows that both parties engaged in physical contact." "After your client threw a drink and punched first," Jessica's attorney, David Morton, countered. Philip nodded. "I've reviewed all the evidence you've provided. I'm going to be honest with you both. My client has a very weak case. If this goes to trial, she'll likely lose. Susan and David exchanged glances. They hadn't expected this kind of candor. However, Philip continued, I have some additional information that might interest you. Information about Raz Blackwell and his involvement in all of this. He pulled out a folder containing copies of the emails between Zoya and Raz, the travel records, everything he'd compiled over the past month. He slid it across the table. Raz Blackwell is a partner at Sterling & Cross. He's married with children. He's been conducting this affair on company time, using company resources, and potentially exposing his firm to liability. His wife has no idea. I'm prepared to make all of this public if necessary. Susan picked up the folder and began reading. Her eyes widened. This is extensive. Raz Blackwell has significantly more to lose than my client does, Philip said. His career, his marriage, his reputation. I'm wondering if your clients might be interested in directing their legal action towards someone with deeper pockets and more vulnerability. It was manipulation of the highest order. Philip was essentially throwing Raz Blackwell under the bus to save Zoya, except he wasn't trying to save her at all. He was setting up something much bigger. We'd need to discuss this with our clients, David said slowly. But it's an interesting angle. Take your time, Philip said. But I should mention that I'm planning to file a response to your complaints within the week. It will include all of this information as part of our defense strategy. The question is whether you want that information to come out in court filings, which become public record, or whether you want to use it strategically in negotiations. He left them with the folder and walked out of the conference room, feeling like he'd just played the best hand of poker in his life. 2 days later, Laura and Jessica's attorneys contacted him. They wanted to add Raz Blackwell as a defendant in both cases, arguing that he had contributed to the circumstances that led to the altercation by conducting an affair with a married woman and causing emotional distress to multiple parties. It was legally questionable at best, but Raz wouldn't want to fight it. The publicity alone would destroy him. Philip agreed to cooperate fully with the expanded litigation. Then he sat down with Zoya to explain what was happening. They were in their living room on a Friday evening. She'd taken the week off work, too embarrassed to face her colleagues. The good news is that we've managed to redirect some of the legal pressure, Philip said. Laura and Jessica are now focusing on Raz Blackwell as a co-defendant. Zoya's face showed confusion, then alarm. Raz? Why Raz? Because he's got more money and more to lose, Philip said simply. It's a logical, strategic move for them. But does he know? Have they contacted him? His lawyers have certainly informed him by now, Philip said. Why? Is that a problem? Zoya stood up, started pacing. I need to call him. I need to warn him. Warn him about what, Zoya? She stopped, realizing she'd said too much. Nothing. We work in the same industry. I know him professionally. Philip looked at his wife and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Right. Professionally. She sat back down, trying to regain her composure. What happens now? With my case? We wait, Philip said. We let the process play out. Eventually we'll end up in court, and I'll defend you to the best of my ability. Zoya nodded, trusting him completely. She had no idea what was coming. The trial date was set for February 14th, Valentine's Day. Philip found the irony delicious. In the weeks leading up to trial, Philip did everything a defense attorney should do. He filed the appropriate motions, conducted discovery, prepared his cross-examination questions. He met with Zoya multiple times to review her testimony and prepare her for what to expect. He played the role of devoted husband and dedicated lawyer perfectly. Behind the scenes, he was doing something else entirely. He was meeting secretly with Susan Park and David Morton, coordinating strategies, sharing information, helping them build the strongest possible case against both Zoya and Raz. He was committing ethical violations that would end his legal career if anyone discovered them. He didn't care. Raz Blackwell had hired a team of expensive lawyers from a white shoe firm downtown. They filed motion after motion trying to get him dismissed from the case, arguing that he had nothing to do with the physical altercation and shouldn't be held liable for other people's actions. The judge, a stern woman named Margaret Holloway, denied most of the motions. She seemed to take personal offense at the affair and the arrogance of everyone involved. The courtroom on the day of the trial was packed. Word had spread about the case, the affair, the fight, the social media video. It had everything people loved: wealthy professionals behaving badly, infidelity, and public humiliation. Philip sat at the defense table with Zoya, who was wearing a conservative navy suit and minimal makeup. She looked nervous, which was appropriate. She should be nervous. Laura and Jessica sat at the plaintiff's table with their attorneys. Raz was at a separate defense table with his legal team, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. Judge Holloway called the court to order, and the trial began. Susan Park gave an opening statement that was devastating in its simplicity. She laid out exactly what had happened. Zoya had carried on an affair with Raz, destroying his marriage and betraying her own. When confronted by friends at a reunion, Zoya had reacted aggressively. Now, she needed to face the consequences. David Morton followed with an equally damaging statement about the emotional toll of Zoya's actions and words. Then it was Philip's turn. He stood up, buttoned his suit jacket, and walked to the jury box. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "what you're going to hear over the next few days is a story about hurt feelings and bad decisions. My client, Zoya, made mistakes. She's not claiming to be perfect, but assault, battery, these are serious charges, and they require serious proof." It was a reasonable opening. Nothing spectacular, nothing that would win the case, but nothing that would lose it immediately either. Zoya looked relieved. The prosecution began calling witnesses. Laura took the stand first, recounting the reunion, the confrontation, and the altercation. Under Susan's questioning, she appeared sympathetic and credible. Then Philip cross-examined her. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, "isn't it true that you initiated the confrontation with my client?" "I asked her a question," Laura said, "about rumors I'd heard." "You ambushed her at a social event to embarrass her publicly?" "I wanted the truth." "And when you got the truth, you called her names, didn't you?" "I called her what she is, a homewrecker." Philip nodded. "So you admit to verbal harassment?" Susan objected. Judge Holloway sustained it, but Philip had made his point. He was defending Zoya, doing exactly what he was supposed to do. The pattern continued over the next 2 days. Philip cross-examined witnesses competently, objected at appropriate times, and made the defense case as well as it could be made with terrible facts. Zoya started to relax, thinking maybe they had a chance. Then the prosecution called their surprise witness, Jennifer Blackwell, Raz's wife. Philip had known this was coming. He'd actually suggested it to Susan during one of their secret meetings. Jennifer took the stand wearing a simple black dress, her eyes red from crying. Susan's questioning was gentle but effective. Jennifer testified about discovering her husband's affair, about the destruction of her marriage, about having to explain to her children why Daddy was moving out. She described finding hotel receipts, love letters, evidence of a double life. "Mrs. Blackwell," Susan asked, "did you know the defendant, Zoya?" "No," Jennifer said. "I never met her until today." "Did that make it easier or harder, knowing your husband was betraying you with a stranger?" "Objection," one of Raz's attorneys called out. "Relevance." "Goes to emotional distress, Your Honor," Susan said. "I'll allow it," Judge Holloway said. Jennifer looked at the jury. "Harder, because it meant he threw away our family for someone who meant nothing. We were just disposable." The courtroom was silent. Even the court reporter looked upset. Philip saw tears on at least 3 jurors' faces. Zoya was staring at the table, her face flushed with shame. Raz looked like he might vomit. When Susan finished, Judge Holloway looked at Philip. Cross-examination. This was the moment. This was what everything had been building toward. Philip stood up slowly. Mrs. Blackwell, I'm very sorry for what you've gone through. I have no questions for you. He sat back down. Zoya grabbed his arm, hissing, What are you doing? You have to discredit her. Trust me, Philip whispered back. But there was nothing to trust. Philip had just let the most damaging testimony of the trial stand without challenge. Any competent defense attorney would have at least tried to limit the damage. Philip had done nothing. The prosecution rested their case, and it was the defense's turn. Philip called Zoya to the stand. This was her chance to explain herself, to show remorse, to humanize herself for the jury. Philip had prepared her for this. They'd practiced her testimony dozens of times. Ms. Zoya, Philip began formally, please tell the jury what happened on the night of December 8th at your college reunion. Zoya took a deep breath and began her prepared testimony. She talked about going to the reunion, about being confronted, about feeling attacked. She followed the script perfectly. Then Philip asked his next question. You've heard testimony about an affair with Raz Blackwell. Is that true? Zoya hesitated. They'd discussed this. She was supposed to show remorse, apologize, make herself sympathetic. Yes, she said quietly. It's true. For how long? About 8 months. Did you consider the consequences? The impact on his family? On our marriage? Zoya looked confused. This wasn't what they'd practiced. I wasn't thinking clearly. Weren't you? Philip asked. You made deliberate choices, didn't you? You booked hotel rooms. You lied to me repeatedly. You told me you were at conferences when you were actually with him. That requires thinking, planning. Objection! Susan called out, though she sounded more surprised than anything. Counsel is testifying. Sustained, Judge Holloway said, looking at Philip curiously. Mr. Philip, please limit yourself to questions. Of course, Your Honor, Philip said. He turned back to Zoya. You called your former friends jealous harpies who couldn't keep their men satisfied. Do you remember saying that? Zoya's eyes widened. That's not... I was upset. Yes or no? Did you say it? Yes, but... And you threw a drink in Laura Mitchell's face? She was attacking me. With words. You reacted with physical aggression. Objection, Susan called again. Your Honor, I don't understand what's happening. He's supposed to be defending her. Judge Holloway leaned forward. Mr. Philip, I'm going to ask you the same question. What exactly are you doing? Philip turned to face the judge directly. Your Honor, I'm ensuring that the truth comes out. Isn't that what we're all here for? The truth! Zoya was crying now, mascara running down her face. Philip, please! What are you doing? He looked at his wife, this woman who had mocked his dreams, betrayed his trust, and thought he was too stupid to notice. I'm giving you exactly what you deserve. The courtroom erupted. Judge Holloway banged her gavel, calling for order. Zoya's sobs echoed off the walls. Raz sat frozen at his table, understanding finally what was happening. Philip had destroyed his own client. He'd systematically demolished any chance Zoya had of winning this case. He'd violated every ethical rule in the book, committed professional suicide, and he'd done it all in front of a packed courtroom. And he'd done it perfectly. Judge Holloway called a recess and demanded to see all attorneys in her chambers immediately. Philip followed the group back, knowing what was coming. Mr. Philip, the judge said once the door was closed, I'm going to be very clear with you. What you just did out there was one of the most egregious violations of professional conduct I've ever witnessed. You sabotaged your own client. You basically handed the case to the prosecution. I should hold you in contempt right now. I understand, Your Honor, Philip said calmly. Do you? Because I'm going to recommend to the state bar that you be disbarred. Your legal career is over. Do you understand that? I do. Why? Judge Holloway demanded. "Why would you destroy yourself like this?" Philip met her eyes steadily. "Because some things are more important than a career, Your Honor. Justice, for instance." "This isn't justice," Judge Holloway said. "This is revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing." The judge stared at him for a long moment, then shook her head. "Get out of my chambers, all of you. We're going to finish this trial, and then I'm going to deal with you, Mr. Philip." They returned to the courtroom. Zoya was still at the defense table, looking shell-shocked. Her eyes met Philip's as he sat down beside her, and he saw the exact moment she understood what he'd done. "You knew," she whispered. "About Raz, about everything. You've known this whole time." "I've known for months," Philip said quietly. "Since November. I found the emails." "And you did this? You destroyed me in court? You're supposed to be my husband." "I was your husband," Philip corrected. "You destroyed that when you decided I wasn't good enough for you. When you mocked me for trying to better myself. When you cheated on me and thought I was too stupid to notice." "I want a different lawyer," Zoya said desperately. "Your Honor, I want to dismiss my attorney." Judge Holloway looked at her with something approaching pity. "Ms. Zoya, at this point in the trial, I'm not inclined to grant a continuance. We're going to finish this today. Mr. Philip, call your next witness or rest your case." Philip stood. "The defense rests, Your Honor." It was over. There were closing arguments, but they were merely formality. Susan and David gave competent summaries of their cases. Philip gave a closing argument that was technically adequate but emotionally hollow, doing nothing to salvage Zoya's position. The jury deliberated for 47 minutes. They found in favor of Laura Mitchell, awarding her $50,000 in damages. They found in favor of Jessica Chen, awarding her $75,000. They also found Raz Blackwell liable for emotional distress and awarded Jennifer Blackwell $200,000 in her separate claim. Zoya sat motionless as the verdicts were read. Her career would survive, probably, but her reputation was destroyed. The video of the fight had gone viral. The trial had been covered by local media. Everyone in her professional circle knew what she'd done and how spectacularly she'd lost. Raz was in even worse shape. His firm had already placed him on administrative leave pending an ethics investigation. His wife was filing for divorce. The $200,000 judgment was the least of his problems. Judge Holloway dismissed the jury, then turned to Philip. "Mr. Philip, you'll be hearing from the State Bar Association. I'm filing a formal complaint today. Bailiff, please ensure Mr. Philip leaves his bar card with the clerk before he exits the building." "Yes, Your Honor," Philip said. He felt nothing, no regret, no fear, no second thoughts. He walked out of the courtroom without looking back at Zoya. In the hallway, Susan Park caught up with him. "That was the craziest thing I've ever seen in a courtroom," she said. "You know you're finished as a lawyer, right?" "I know." "Was it worth it?" Philip considered the question. He'd spent 3.5 years becoming a lawyer. He'd sacrificed sleep, social life, and any semblance of work-life balance. He'd passed the bar exam, gotten hired at a good firm, and started building a career. Now it was all gone, destroyed in a single afternoon. "Yes," he said. "It was worth it." Susan shook her head. "I don't understand you, but I have to admit, I've never seen anyone commit professional suicide more effectively. What are you going to do now?" "I have no idea," Philip admitted. "But whatever it is, it'll be on my terms." He left the courthouse and walked to his car in the parking garage. His phone was buzzing with messages, from Henderson, from colleagues at the firm, from the Bar Association, from reporters who'd been in the courtroom. He ignored all of them. He drove to the apartment he'd shared with Zoya, knowing she wouldn't be there yet. She'd probably gone somewhere to cry, to rage, to process what had just happened. He packed his things methodically, clothes, books, his diploma from law school, the few possessions that mattered to him. It took less than 2 hours, 6 years of marriage reduced to boxes that fit in his car trunk. He left his key on the kitchen counter and walked out for the last time. 3 days later, Philip received the formal notice from the State Bar Association. They were opening disciplinary proceedings. His license to practice law was suspended immediately pending investigation. The hearing would be in 6 weeks. Henderson called him the day after the trial, his voice cold with fury. "What the hell were you thinking? You've made this firm look terrible. We're getting calls from reporters asking if we knew what you were planning. I vouched for you, Philip. I trusted you." "I'm sorry you got dragged into this," Philip said, and he meant it. Henderson had given him a chance when he was a brand new attorney. He deserved better. "I'll make a public statement that the firm had no knowledge of my actions." "Damn right you will," Henderson said. "And you're fired, effective immediately. Clear out your office today." Philip did. His co-workers avoided looking at him as he packed his few belongings into a cardboard box. Sarah Kim stopped by his office as he was finishing. "I heard what you did," she said. "Why?" "Long story," Philip said. "Try me." So he told her, standing in his almost empty office, about Zoya's affair, about the mockery and contempt, about discovering the truth and planning his revenge. Sarah listened without interrupting. "That's incredibly stupid," she said when he finished. "You could have just divorced her, taken her for everything in the settlement. Instead, you destroyed your entire career." "I know. But it's also kind of brilliant," she admitted. "Twisted, ethically bankrupt, and completely insane, but brilliant. You used the system against itself. You used your position as her attorney to guarantee she'd lose." "That's one way to look at it." Sarah shook her head. "I hope it was worth it, Philip. I really do, because you'll never practice law again. You know that, right?" "I know." She left, and Philip finished packing. He carried his box out through the lobby, past the receptionist who wouldn't meet his eyes, and out into the cold February afternoon. His phone rang. It was his mother. He'd been avoiding her calls since the trial. "Philip," she said when he answered, "I just saw the news. They're saying you sabotaged your own client in court, your wife. Please tell me that's not true." "It's true," Philip said. His mother was silent for a long moment. "Why would you do something so self-destructive?" "Because she deserved it, Mom. Because sometimes the only way to get justice is to sacrifice everything else." "That's not justice, honey. That's just hurting yourself to hurt someone else." "Maybe," Philip conceded. "But I don't regret it." Another long silence. Then his mother sighed. "What are you going to do now?" "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." "You always do," she said. "I love you, even when you're being an idiot." "I love you too, Mom." The bar hearing happened 6 weeks later, in a conference room downtown. 3 attorneys sat on the disciplinary panel, listening as the bar prosecutor laid out the case against Philip. He'd violated rules of professional conduct. He'd breached his duty to his client. He'd acted with conflicts of interest. He'd committed fraud upon the court. The evidence was overwhelming. The courtroom transcript spoke for itself. Philip didn't mount a defense. He didn't claim temporary insanity or emotional distress. He simply acknowledged that he'd done everything he was accused of doing. "Mr. Philip," the panel chair said, "I've been practicing law for 35 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this. You had a promising career ahead of you. Why throw it all away?" "Because my wife needed to face consequences for her actions," Philip said, "and I was the only one in a position to make that happen." "That's not your job," the panel chair said. "Your job was to defend her, regardless of what she'd done to you personally. I understand that. I also understand that what I did was wrong, legally and ethically. I'm not trying to justify it or excuse it. I'm just explaining it." The panel deliberated for 20 minutes. When they returned, the chair read their decision. "Philip, you are hereby disbarred from the practice of law in this state. Your actions were a fundamental betrayal of your duties as an attorney and damaged the integrity of the legal profession." This decision is effective immediately and is permanent. You may not apply for reinstatement. Philip nodded. He'd expected nothing less. He walked out of the hearing and into his new life, whatever that would be. He had some money saved, enough to last a few months while he figured things out. He'd have to find a new career, build a new identity. He was 35 years old, starting over from scratch, but he was free. Free from Zoya, free from a marriage that had long lost its spark, free from pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. 2 months after the trial, the divorce was finalized. Zoya didn't contest anything. She just wanted it over quickly and quietly. Philip kept his car and his personal belongings. She kept the apartment and most of their shared assets. He didn't care about any of it. The last time he saw her was at the lawyer's office where they signed the final papers. She looked thinner, older, tired. The affair with Raz had ended the day of the trial. Raz wanted nothing to do with her after his divorce cost him his house, his kids, and a substantial portion of his income. "I hope you're happy," Zoya said as they walked out of the office. "You got your revenge. You destroyed both our lives." "I didn't destroy your life," Philip said. "You did that yourself. I just made sure you couldn't escape the consequences." "Was it worth it? Giving up everything just to hurt me?" Philip thought about the question seriously. He'd lost his career, his marriage, his reputation, and his future as an attorney. He'd spent 3.5 years working toward something only to throw it away in a single afternoon. "Yes," he said finally. "It was worth every second." Zoya shook her head and walked away. Philip watched her go, feeling nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no regret. Just a cold, empty peace. He got in his car and drove away from the lawyer's office, away from that chapter of his life. The afternoon sun was bright, the sky clear. Somewhere ahead was a future he couldn't quite see yet, but he'd figure it out. He always did.